Welcome to Lydia Fenet's Claim Your Confidence, a podcast that will introduce you to the most powerful women in the world as they talk about their own confidence journey. No matter what obstacles you face, Claim Your Confidence will inspire you, motivate you, and give you a roadmap to live the life you want. So, are you ready to claim your confidence?
Welcome back to Claim Your Confidence, everyone. I'm Lydia Fenet, broadcasting out of Newsstand Studio in Rockefeller Center. I hope you all are ready for a great conversation. Welcome, Ariel Kaye, to the incredible Claim Your Confidence podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here today. I have so many questions. For those of you who have not heard of Parachute, I can't even imagine that that's true. It is one of those companies that is ubiquitous, and I need to hear everything about how it began. So why don't you start us off? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Los Angeles, and I lived there for my entire childhood and then moved to New York to go to college. So this is my old stomping grounds.
Back where it all began.
Exactly. It's back where Parachute first came to be.
So tell me a little bit about you as a child. Who were you? What did you like to do? Where were your interests?
I was a very curious child. I loved playing outdoors. I loved theater. I loved singing. Singing was my biggest passion growing up. I was classically trained. I did solo competitions. I was in many choirs. But really the arts and music and being very creative. My mother works in education, and so a day after school for us was, her writing a play based on whatever topic or theme or story we wanted to tell, and us rehearsing in our bedrooms and coming out and doing a show in the afternoon or in the evening. So, there was a lot of storytelling going on, which I think was a through line in terms of my career and my passion and what I do at Parachute.
It also feels very Los Angeles to grow up with a mom who's writing plays, even if she was in education, that was your afternoon.
Yeah, it was entertainment adjacent for sure.
It definitely touched on that. So when you were growing up, what was your personality like? Obviously, if you're in a house where people are putting on shows, and I can say this because we do this with my kids too, they love nothing more than pinning us to the couch for 4 to 5 completely different acts every afternoon. What were you like as a child? Were you confident? Was this something that was in you from the minute you grew up, or were you kind of a person who had to be brought out of her shell?
I think a little bit of both. The early days of growing up, I went to a small school. I was definitely bullied as a kid in that school, and I think that was a big part of my upbringing, had a huge impact on me.
In what way?
Confidence, which is something obviously that we're talking about. But I think just like finding my own and finding my community. I think it became very clear to me at a young age that finding your people is so important. And it's actually one of, my biggest advice for other entrepreneurs is to find your people, find your community. But as I grew up, I went to a bigger school. I found my people, I found my hobbies, I played sports, I did more theater and music, and I really found my footing. I don't think I was necessarily entrepreneurial as a child. I loved to learn. I was really interested in learning, had an insatiable appetite, got bored easily if I wasn't learning new things. Was doing a ton of extracurriculars. I was in extracurriculars all the time. There was always something going on. Summer camp, I think those experiences brought me out of my shell and helped me find my way and find a community of people that I related to and that I felt supported by.
And so you left LA to move to New York for college. Had you left before that, or was that really sort of your first time outside of the West Coast, moving to the big bad city?
I had done some traveling with family, and I had been going to sleepaway camp for summers on the East Coast and on the West Coast, but I knew I wanted to go across the country for school. I had spent a lot of time growing up in New York with my parents, and I just had this idea that I wanted to be in this big, incredible city where everything seemed possible. And I have such formative memories of coming here as a child and seeing the theater and doing the arts and going to museums and being outside and walking around and walking for miles and miles and miles and just feeling so inspired by the energy here. And it's funny, we were just talking that I just brought my daughter here, and she's 4, and seeing her love for New York as a 4-year-old, it's been a very emotional weekend since I arrived in New York and before coming on this podcast. Just watching her experience the city is very nostalgic, and I don't know, full circle in a way.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like so many people have that New York story. My mom said that when I was 10, it was one of my first times coming to the city. And I just turned to her and said, I'm going to live here one day. She knew that it was true, just because I think for some people it's almost like being a moth being drawn to a flame. You
For
just
my
can't get away.
10th birthday, I came here with my mom and we saw 4 plays and we ate incredible meals and we went on a shopping spree and, bought all the things and did all the things. And it was, one of the most memorable trips of my life. And I think I was hooked.
And you were hooked. So you came back for college.
Came back for college. I did grad school here as well. And then I didn't leave for a long time. I lived here for almost 10 years. And I think if you had asked multiple or any of my friends at that point, if I would move back to LA, the answer would have been no. I was a lifer for a while until I wasn't.
Until you weren't. And now you're on the beach and probably very happy there too. When you were in New York, you went to grad school, but none of this was for home at this point. This was not where it all started for you. So talk us through your time in New York. I do love to always give entrepreneurs the seedlings of how something started and then what happens as your idea grows into something.
Yeah, so I went to NYU and I was in the Gallatin School, so I got to make up my own major. I was in the School of Individualized Study, which in retrospect is pretty entrepreneurial. It was really on me to create a program and to create a curriculum that NYU deemed degree worthy and so
graduate worthy.
Exactly. And so as a part of that, I also was able to do a ton of internships. And so I interned in many different industries and, in fashion and in PR and in TV and music. And I bounced around, which I loved. I mean, I learned so much from those experiences. And then I went to grad school because after working in PR for a few years, I realized I had no idea what I wanted to do. And grad school seemed like the perfect way to delay my
Making
future.
that decision.
Yeah, exactly. And so I got a master's in media studies from the New School. And it was there that I ended up finding a career in advertising, which is where I worked for many years before I started Parachute. But in 2006, I had been spending a lot of time helping friends decorate their apartments. I was doing a ton of DIY projects in my own apartment. I loved hosting. I was constantly thinking about how to create beautiful spaces. When my friends moved to new apartments, they would, drag me along shopping to get my input. And I was kind of doing this interior design thing on the side for fun and having a lot of fun with it. I started an interior design blog while I was in grad school that was called Second Story View, and you cannot find it on the internet. I've taken it down.
That has been scrubbed.
Yeah, but I can find it. You can't find it. But I lived on the second floor apartment, and that's where I got the name. And I was, photographing my own design projects. I was photographing other people's apartments that I had helped decorate, doing DIY things. It was an outlet for me. But as a result, I became somewhat of a super consumer. I was shopping for home products a lot. So not an interior designer by trade, had no textile experience, had never worked in retail, but just was consuming and falling more in love with the category.
And this was adjacent to the job that you were doing at the time? So this was just something you were sort of doing for fun?
It was like a side project for fun, yes.
So what was your full-time job at that point? Advertising?
I was working in advertising. Okay. So I was on the strategic side of creative. I was working at a big agency called Digitas. I was, working with big clients like American Express and Burger King and Panasonic, like big brands with big budgets. And I was on the strategic side of creative, so doing a lot of consumer behavior research, really thinking about what motivates and inspires people, which is not necessarily, the normal path to becoming an entrepreneur. But in retrospect, I now realize, especially when you're building a consumer brand, being a person that is fully obsessed with the consumer mindset is actually a huge advantage.
A huge advantage. So you were learning without even realizing that this was going to be something
I was thinking about people and how to connect with people and how to build relationships with people and how to make them curious and inspired and connect and all of these things that as a brand you have to do in order to sell products and build relationships. Yeah.
It is interesting when you have that sort of cushy job, the 9 to 5, the job where you get a paycheck, just to really start to look at that side hustle and that passion and think to yourself, this might be the time. So what did that look like for you?
It was 2012.
It was September 1st of 2012.
It was 2012. And it was during the summer. And I had just gotten to a place at my job where I realized that this wasn't a forever job. I was less interested in climbing the corporate ladder. I saw a lot of friends joining early stage companies. It was a pretty cool time in New York. It was really when a lot of the startups and some of these bigger companies were just getting started. And I had a bunch of friends that were going to work at these companies, and I was seeing them just love what they were doing. I had friends that were starting their own companies, and I just saw that passion, that desire to build something, getting your hands dirty, really making a huge impact. And I realized that's what was missing. And I didn't mention the fact that I had worked many different jobs. I was a job hopper. Like, if you look at my early resume, it's the thing that no one wants to see when they're submitting their 3 months
here.
there, 6 months there. Like, for some reason, my parents were like, sure, look for the next thing. If you can find it, great. I realized that I had reached a point in my career where I really wanted to make an impact, where I wanted to do something big. And I did not think that meant starting my own company per se, but I did have this moment in 2012 where I realized that, I loved what I was doing in advertising as far as building relationships and being that consumer advocate and really thinking about, how to really connect with people. And I loved home. And I had that aha moment where I thought, what if there was a way?
And so what does that way look like? It started at the very beginning of that journey as an entrepreneur. Tell me what that looks like from that aha moment for the next year. What are you doing? How are you growing your business? How are you looking for investors?
I had this aha moment where I thought, if I could merge my interest in home and design and I could merge my interest with building brands and connecting with people, that would be a dream. That would be ideal. That's what I would really love to be doing. Again, it's 2012, beginning of 2013, and D2C as a concept and as an idea was just getting off the ground. Direct-to-consumer businesses were just starting to pop up, and there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement around this new shopping way of, this new shopping behavior, this new value proposition of going direct to consumer, cutting out the middleman, circumventing all of these, retail markups and getting that premium quality to the customer. And as a consumer myself, I was into it. I was like, that makes sense. I want to shop. I want to buy products from brands that are thinking about me and that are appealing to me and that care about quality and are changing things, are shaking things up, are looking to do stuff differently. And it felt fresh and different and inspired. And so I started big, and I thought, I want to build a home brand. And then I realized that was big and challenging. And so I thought, if I was really going to do this, where would I start? And so by the end of 2012, I had narrowed in on the bedroom. And I thought, you spend a third of your life in bed. Sleep is the most important part of health and happiness and productivity and all of these things that matter in our lives. And the bedroom is the most intimate part of the home. And, what if I could create a product and tell a story about the best night of sleep that you might ever have? People might be into that. That might be interesting. And I realized that there wasn't a brand in this space. People could tell me, oh yeah, I went to this store or that store, but no one could tell me a brand on their bed. And as someone who had been helping build brands, I realized that this was a 1 in a million. It's so rare to find a category where a brand doesn't exist. And I became obsessed.
What was your first call when you figured this out? Who was on the other end of that call, and what did you say?
Well, I had dinner one night with a friend of mine who is currently on my board and has been my biggest champion and cheerleader since the very beginning. I was at a restaurant called the Mermaid Inn on 2nd Ave.
I love the Mermaid Inn, 5th Ave or 5th Street. I remember that well.
And
the great chocolate pot de creme.
Yeah, I said, I have this idea. I have this crazy idea. But I can't do it. How could I do it? I have no experience. I've never worked in retail. I've never worked in home. I've never built a brand before. I'm not entrepreneurial. I don't have a finance background. I had a whole list of reasons why I couldn't do it.
Put a pin in that for a second.
Sure.
And I just want to say to everyone who is out there who has a self-doubt spiral, when you're sitting in front of someone who is crushing it as an entrepreneur, to hear that they too started out with a list of things that they couldn't do, and we're seated across, obviously, from someone who said the opposite.
Yeah. And so my friend said, I've never said this before, but you're a founder. And I was like, what? Me? He was like, I wouldn't say this to anyone or anyone that I didn't mean it, but you can do this. You can build this business. This is a great idea. I'm going to help you. He is a serial entrepreneur, had a ton of experience, but he said, you can do this. And that was that shifted something. Yeah. It was a vote of confidence. It was someone that saw me in a way that I didn't see myself. And it gave me the courage and validation that I needed to take a leap of faith. And I took a leap of faith. I quit my job.
That was it.
Almost immediately.
Almost immediately. And what did you do next?
This was the end of the year. I started putting together a business plan, which, wasn't really a business plan, but more an idea, an outline, what I wanted to be, the problem we were going to solve. I think I Googled, what is a pitch deck? And it was 8 different slides. It's like the idea, the challenge, the problem, the solution, the opportunity. I made those slides. I tried to really conceptualize what this could look like. But I became obsessed. I mean, I became the person I saw all my friends becoming when they were working at these companies, and they were so consumed and they were so excited. I was doing so much research. I mean, I was learning anything and everything. But ultimately, I quit my job and I got on a plane and I went to Europe and I visited 15 factories because I knew that in order to make products, I needed to know how they were made. I needed to have a supplier, but I really needed to understand how they were made.
But where did you even find the list for 15 factories? This is what I always find so interesting about the entrepreneur. And I really get into the brass tacks because I do find it amazing that was your next step. You thought to yourself, okay, so now I've got to go visit 15 factories in Europe. Most people would be like, and now I need to sit in front of my computer and Google things about how to start a company.
Well, so there was a lot of Googling involved.
Okay, just making sure. This wasn't like a
where are factories?
What do factories do?
Yeah. What is a factory? As someone who had helped build brands and really less build brands, but was on the consumer side and really thinking about how to connect with customers, I intuitively knew that there were going to be 2 things that mattered. Maybe 3. There was going to be the story of how things are made and the heritage and the quality. And there was going to have to be some sort of compelling narrative around why and differentiation. And because, anyone can get someone to buy something, but whether you get someone to come back really depends on the quality of the product. So in doing my research and in realizing that there was no brands in this category, what I did learn was that people associated quality with Italy and with Portugal and with these countries where there was this heritage, where these products have been being made for a lot of years, hundreds of years. But they're also so expensive. People said, I've heard of Frette, I've heard of this brand, I've heard of that brand, but, they cost $1,000. I could never buy a sheet set. So I knew I had to go to Europe. And I knew that if I could get that product from that region and have that same sort of heritage story, that I would at least be able to close that trust gap, hopefully enough that people would say, oh, they must be good quality because you're not just buying sheets from Italy that aren't good, How could that be?
So what is going right during this process and what is going wrong for you?
I would say that first year of just preparation, figuring things out, going to Europe, finding the factory, coming back to LA, having a to-do list that was so long that I didn't even know where to begin. I mean, it was highs and lows. There were days where I felt like this is the best idea ever. I'm gonna nail it. This is major. I'm gonna be the most successful person on the planet.
The Martha Stewart. Of
That's me. It's just me. That's me now. It's so nice to meet you. To literally being like, I'm going to lose my mind and fully
I will
having
be penniless
tomorrow. And I am
like
having a full spiral mental breakdown. And sometimes those emotions were happening in the course of 10 minutes. It was rough. But I will say I got back to LA even more excited, even more consumed with this idea, even more passionate about the fact that this was a great idea and it was going to happen. I needed to see it through. But I also had this whole idealized version of what that all meant. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, I've got this great idea. Yeah, it's a great idea. We can all agree. Everyone's telling me it's a great idea. So I'll be able to raise money. I'll be able to pay myself salary. I'll be able to hire people. And then, we'll launch a few months later and it'll just all be great.
But that's not the reality, I'm guessing.
No, that wasn't the reality. So, I got back to LA. I started talking to investors. I ran into the whole chicken and the egg, catch-22. People are like, that's a great idea. You seem good enough. You've never done this before, but it seems like you think you can. But I want to see more traction. I want to see more progress before I give you money. And so raising money was not happening. I mean, it just wasn't. And
this is 2013?
This is now 2013.
Okay. We've moved out of 2012.
We've moved out of 2012. We're now in 2013 and I'm back in LA and I had decided to raise money and I just couldn't. I mean, it was no one was interested in giving me money. People were interested in giving me money later. But, I was a first-time founder with no experience. I was a sole founder. I had not one person working with me or for me, which people were like, you sure you can't find one person that wants to do this with you?
But you said that this is something that's continued along in your career as well. Like, this is your company.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, I did a lot more Googling. I figured out how to do things. I ended up figuring out how to get some product, but I ended up joining an accelerator program, which gave me like a first amount of capital that I was able to receive into my bank account and the next day send to Italy. It's like
it was more of a conduit to Italy.
It went in and came out. But to buy my first batch of inventory. And so in buying my first batch of inventory, I was able to launch a business.
And when that first batch of inventory arrived, were you sort of like, this is it? Or you were just like, I can't believe that this has finally happened and oh my God, what have I done?
It was both. I mean, it was still like a team of one at that point. And working with an accelerator, I had an office to go to. I had like met an amazing group of other entrepreneurs, which helped me find place and purpose and gave me a network of people to commiserate with and to celebrate with and to learn from. And, all of a sudden working until 3 a.m. was less lonely and more fun and exciting. And, there was someone to eat cold pizza with, and so that made things easier. But yeah, all of a sudden I had these boxes of sheets that I moved into a storage unit, which was my warehouse. And yeah, it was just this team of one trying to figure out what I was doing.
So what happened next?
I launched a website. I mean, parachutehome.com. And I started selling products. Early days, they were like, people that I was begging to buy products. And it was very obvious. It was like, a friend of a friend. I'd look at the orders, in a course of a week and I'd be like, well, I can map everyone. And then we really officially launched. So there was a period of time where we kind of pre-launched, and then we launched in January 2014. And I had spent my first few years out of college working in PR, and I was a big believer of PR and launch press and that launch moment and how important that was in a brand's life cycle. And I don't have money to spend on marketing, so I'm going to spend it on PR, and I'm going to get press, and I'm going to pray and hope and fingers crossed that this does something. And sure enough, we got really good press that first week that I launched. And all of a sudden it went from 3 orders to 10 orders to 30 orders to I'm going to need a bigger warehouse, and it was wild.
I heard that same advice from Molly Fining, who started Babyators. That was her first company. And I heard her speak at a conference probably 6 or 7 years ago. It was a couple of years before my first book launched. And she said the same thing about pre-launch press and said, you will never in your life regret spending money on the press for the launch of whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And it was the truest statement I've ever, and a huge shout out to my PR team who is incredible. And I always forget how important it is, because the other thing that you often don't think about press is press begets press.
Exactly.
The minute one article hits, there's another person who calls. And it's the power of suggestion. This person would be good for this. And that just is completely part of the press cycle that you don't really think about. So the press has obviously helped you grow. Is your company able to keep up with the press at this point?
No.
Just flat no.
No. I had spent every penny on the inventory. The money came in, went. And I had this inventory thinking it would last a few months. And all of a sudden, it was gone. And so we were able to get more inventory, and then it was more press. And at that point, I mean, the business was just kind of event driven, but press beget press, So the press had a long tail, people would see the stories, people would share them, other people would call because they saw the press, and people like just writing about new businesses. But yeah, there was that first year we were sold out a lot. And it was that was really hard for me. I mean, I think as someone who's a control freak and perfectionist and all the things that many entrepreneurs are. It was really challenging to be in that position and to think that we're missing all these orders. Or there was a moment we had this small blurb mention in the Wall Street Journal, and all of a sudden we were sold through our next shipment and then had pre-ordered and miscalculated, and we were sold through the next one. All of a sudden I'm writing people emails saying, it'll be 4 to 6 months before you get your bedding.
sheets.
People are like, what? And I will say most people said, thank you and congratulations. And I appreciate the honesty and transparency. And it's hard to start a business. And then there were other people that were like, learn how to start a business, and but
And you're like, delete
yeah,
that
I'm
number.
like, well,
next time I will when I start my next business.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it was a good lesson in just transparency and how to, the bar is set so low from a customer experience perspective.
Is that right?
I think so. I think it's getting better. I think brands are realizing how important it is to foster a positive relationship with customers. But, 10-ish, 9 years ago, I don't think that kind of care was being put into those channels. And so I don't think there was a lot of transparency from big box retailers when you were emailing them with a complaint or a question or a request. I also was the founder emailing every single person saying, I'm so sorry that this has happened. I just started this business and I'm, so excited.
Just learning.
I'm learning. Yeah. And I'm also so grateful that, you've taken a risk and a shot at, our products. And, I can't wait for you to feel them. It's just going to be a minute.
It's going to be about half a year that you're going to get them.
You'll see them in a few years. Yeah.
So is that the point at which you start building a team?
Yes.
So talk to me about how you found your team and what that looked like.
I made my first hire about a month after I launched. And I think one of my superpowers has always been just an awareness around my strengths and my weaknesses, and with pretty low ego attached to it. I knew that I needed help, and I knew that I needed to bring people in that were smarter than me and were area experts in parts of the business that I just didn't have the background, especially finance and modeling and planning and inventory management, all these things that I just had no experience that are really critical to the success of a consumer brand. So, my first hire, it was a person who could wear many hats but had a finance background and could build models and could, really help think about planning. But, neither of us had ever bought inventory before. So, he was using, various equations for trading and things. We were just the blind leading the blind. But I was able to hire a few people that were able to support the business, and but I had a lot of insecurity around my first hires because I couldn't pay people what they deserved to be paid. It delayed my desire to hire people longer than it should have. I don't think I realized that people would be excited about the opportunity to get into a company from the ground up. And it was really just all about finding people that shared your vision and your excitement and passion for that stage. There's so many people that love that part of the growth. It's such a unique, special moment when you're getting a brand off the ground. And I just assumed that no one would want that no one would be able to sacrifice, or that no one would take a risk, or that no one would believe in me. There was a lot of that swirling around. Yeah, it took some time before I got confident enough to be like, wait, no, this is cool. This is people want to work here. This is great.
So were you raising money at this point? Were you able to go back at this point to say to people, okay, I'm improving myself here?
Yeah, so I did. So I launched in January 2014. We'll get back to the timeline. And by March, I had raised $1 million. So I launched the business. We had this incredible early traction, and relatively speaking, that was the easiest amount of capital that I was able to raise. There was early momentum, and I was able to get people excited.
And so what happened after that?
A lot more pressure. But it was build time. I hired more people. I was able to buy more inventory. I was able to kind of start dabbling in some marketing initiatives and testing. But really, it was just kind of still one foot in front of the other and trying to stay afloat and trying to not make mistakes that would tank the business.
It's nice to hear in a way that you can just move forward and have the faith that things are going to work out in some regard, that you're not 100 steps ahead being like, okay, this is the plan, this is the strategy. Because I know some people have come in here, they're like, I knew exactly what I was going to do. It's nice to hear that a lot of it for you was figuring it out, because that's also a strategy for doing anything in life. And I think a lot of people aren't they don't feel like they have enough confidence in themselves to be able to do that, to trust themselves through that process.
I think early on I was like, all right, so we're going to launch with bedding, and we're going to do bedding for a year, and then we're going to launch bath, and then we're going to do this. And I had this like every year we should launch a new category and this and that, and then we're going to do retail. And I think very early on I realized that everything was going to take a lot longer than expected. Yeah. And that also that this accelerated timeline was not going to do me any favors.
Right.
And that I really needed to focus on doing what we were doing well and better than well. I realized that like building a brand, a multi-category brand, a lifestyle brand, is certainly not a sprint. It's a long marathon. And that we would be better off slowing down our growth initiatives and just pushing ourselves to be the best version of what we were today, back then, instead of trying to be bigger and do more.
Yeah.
That was like a big, like sigh of relief once I was able to really see that we would have time to do all those things, but they didn't need to happen in the first year of launch. But I think, that's part of the pressure you feel as an entrepreneur. You launch a business and then people are like, what's next? What's next? So you hit this milestone, you did $1 million in revenue. When are you going to do 5? When are you going to do 10? I mean, it's like everything in life. People are always
putting up artificial timelines.
Yeah, artificial timelines, and once I was able to filter out some of that noise and like really develop a clear point of view about what Parachute was and was going to be and what I wanted the brand to serve and all of that, we were able to focus on doing what we do best. And that's, I think, a huge part of our success today.
At what point in this journey did you have children? What advice could you give for someone who is an entrepreneur who is also having children at the same time while running a business? Is there anything that you can say to help give someone confidence that this is something that they can do and that they can manage this, even though it could be a little crazy at times?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I definitely... When I started Parachute, I made this commitment to myself that Parachute came first. Mm-hmm. I was starting this business. I was taking it really seriously. This was like, I had just turned 30. I, was like, this is it. Like, this is my time. If it's not now, then it'll never happen. I want to do this. And I'm going to put it first. I'm going to miss birthday parties. I'm going to miss trips. I'm going to miss these things. Like, I'm like fully okay with that, because this is my number one priority. I knew I always wanted to have kids, and I knew that was an important thing to me. My daughter was born in January 2019. And at that point, I did have a team. I did feel more secure, but I didn't take maternity leave. I mean, I was terrified to step away from the business. I, didn't know what was going to happen. I think most moms would tell you that having kids makes you more efficient. It makes you more mindful of your time. It makes you more present. I'm so happy working. Like, it's such an important part of my life, and it fills me up in a way that, my kids fill me up as well, and I love them. But it's so important for me and for my kids to see me love what I do. And, I brought my daughter to the Parachute store, and and she's like, this is mama's store,
creation.
And it's like, and she's still pretty young, but she gets it and she's excited about it. And I'm so grateful for my community of founder moms. They are like my lifeline in so many ways. Yeah. And so, having that community and finding people who are going through similar phases to just pick you up when you need to be picked up and to
give you that text that's like, you've got this.
Exactly.
It's a tough day.
And also, and that just get it. I think community is so important. But yeah, I mean, I there's never a good time for anything, No. It's just got to do the things that you want to do.
I remember going away on maternity leave. I'd been at my company at the time for 13 years when I left on my first maternity leave. And I remember saying to everyone, I'm going to be back the minute I have the baby and all of this stuff. And I wasn't. In fact, I turned off. I just turned off my phone for the first time in 13 years. I just turned it off.
Incredible.
And I took maternity leave. I took the time. And I remember when I was going back the night before, I was hysterical. I could not stop crying. And I remember just everything about it just felt so heavy to leave Beatrice at home. And I was so sad. And I remember walking back into the same office that I'd worked for 13 years and sitting at my desk and also feeling at the same time, wait, this is a part of me too. Mm-hmm. And I'd forgotten that on maternity leave, because with the sleepless nights and all of the things, the diapers, and you just forget that there is this other part that does give you a spark.
Yeah.
If that's something that you want, there's so much energy and life in that too. And I agree. I mean, my children have seen me on stages, they come with me
Yeah.
on trips, and there is such beauty in that. And I know that there are so many moms who will appreciate hearing that from you, because it is such a tough thing as women to be juggling both the full-on work and the full-on life of as a mom, and wanting to be good at both of those things. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I will just say that I don't recommend not taking maternity leave. That's not like
But
I
do
think
it
it's-
however you do it. you
Yeah,
know?
but I do think it's really important, and I think for me, in retrospect, there's parts of me that wish I did, and I didn't for both kids, so I didn't learn my lesson. But for me, if you look at my calendar's open for my entire team to see. I have times blocked off throughout my day. I take my son to a music class. I do this. I pick up my daughter. I try to model the importance of work and family and whatever else is passionate and makes you happy. And I think that's important. But
I really do feel like when you think of balance, it's so equal, but also so difficult. There's no way to do it. I
Yeah.
just try to keep one side from hitting the ground while the other one is sky
Yeah, exactly.
high 99% of the time. If I can get like 80-20, I feel like I am
Totally.
absolutely crushing my week.
totally.
So you have created Parachute to be what you ultimately wanted it to be. I mean, you are taking over category after category. What happens next for Parachute?
Oh, there's so much. I mean, we're building a brand that I hope my grandkids are shopping from. We really want to be the ubiquitous name in home and in comfort and in quality. And, we open our 25th store this week, and we've got more coming. And, we're doing what we continue to do best, which, I believe is create beautiful products and build beautiful spaces for people to shop. And, we think about the people and the planet and doing what we do with care and with attention to detail and with a real love and passion for community and for our customers. And I feel so much gratitude for what I get to do and the people I get to work alongside. And I never, ever, ever get old or tired of hearing someone say, "I sleep on your sheets." I'm like, "You do? What? Really?"
That's amazing.
But it motivates me and inspires me, and I'm still having so much fun. And we're nine and change in, I've been
amazing.
doing this for 10 full years. It's wild.
And I can tell that there are going to be many, many years in front
I
of you.
sure hope so, yeah.
Well, Ariel, thank you so much for spending your time with us. I know you're a busy woman, and I appreciate you
pleasure.
stopping by Newsstand Studios to talk with me. And I want to leave our listeners with one question for you. You have spoken many times over the course of this interview about the community of people who lift you up. Who are you surrounding yourself with to make sure in those times when you're not feeling strong is around to lift you up? So DM me, DM Ariel, let her know. And please come back and listen again. Newsstand Studios, thank you for hosting us, Joe. Thank you for producing this and making it sound as good as you always do. Thank you to Rockefeller Center for creating this amazing place for us to do all of this. I'm Lydia Fenet. This is Claim Your Confidence. I hope you will tune in again next week. Thanks for listening.